So there's a fence and a gate in the interior that is very symbolic of a lot of issues that are important. On one side you have a development project, and on the other hand you have a community of Amerindians who are being displaced by that.
Suriname. It's one of the least known countries in South America and the smallest independent nation on the continent. Suriname is nestled north of Brazil between French Guiana and Guyana. Culturally, it's a diverse blend of its neighbors on the South American continent and in the Caribbean. Suriname has the highest percentage of rainforest cover for its size and is known for its biodiversity. In the 17th century, the Dutch claimed the country as its colony, and it became Dutch Guyana. The local indigenous population, who are commonly called Amerindians, retreated to the interior of the country, into the Amazon basin. Today, there are at least 5 distinct tribes in Suriname: the Arawaks, or Lokonos, the Caraibes, or Kaliñas, the Waros, the Trios, and Guayanas. During the time of the slave trade, the capital city, Paramaribo, became a shipping center for the human trade. In downtown Paramaribo, the slave trading buildings still exist, empty as a reminder. Some Africans who had been sold as slaves escaped from the plantations along the coast and disappeared into the rainforest. Here they formed their own communities and were known as Maroons, and include at least 6 distinct Maroon groups: the Juka, or Okaner, the Saramaka, Paramaka, Aluku, or Boni, the Quinti, and Matawai. The slave trade was abolished in 1862 and led to a shortage of labor. This opened the way for a large multicultural immigrant population. Today, the people of Suriname are very diverse, including Hindustanis, Creoles, Javanese, Maroons, Chinese, Amerindians, and others. 90% of the population live on the coast, with most of the Maroons and Amerindians still living in the interior. In 1975, Dutch Guiana became the independent nation of Suriname. But after only 5 years of independence, a military regime took control of the country and declared it a socialist nation. This was followed by an interior civil war. Coastal politicians used interior people and guerrilla warfare in civil war for power and money. In 1992, a peace was declared in the interior with the signing of the Lelydorp Treaty. However, Amerindian and Maroon people now face new and bigger threats, as their land is being destroyed in the name of economic development that mostly benefits government politicians and international corporations. The interior people now face the most destructive period in their history. These are the stories of the indigenous people inside Suriname.
Amawansisa machikachitawa mariko sambia wa mariko no tumajimeto ya jibeto madikachitawa kono.
Ik vind het nou een kwalijke zaak, want zijn de uingitok unaleti sa meshi. Maar waarvan allemaal sak mo pat dorosei kong trakondre de mai koteku ala gudu isabi uingi unane.
Suriname's economy relies on exports, and the interior land is rich with many raw natural resources. 80% of Suriname land is untouched rainforest, with a wealth of resources and biodiversity. But the government has given at least 40% of its land as concessions to industry and foreign investors who exploit the land until it's no longer economically valuable or habitable.
Omsa, oma goto, oma bauxite, aardolie, udu, visie.
Land concessions are threatening indigenous people in Suriname's interior as their land and water are destroyed for economic development. This benefits outsiders, but hurts the people who have lived there for centuries. The government takes the interior land for many reasons, but in all cases, economic development, is the primary reason their land is given to outsiders.
Dus op de Nederlandse kamp, ook toen dat we een soortgelijk probleem per uitbreiding voor luchthaven en de matak ontwikkeling, dus de moest de man voor je in.
Muri jindau, wetsanchi, ririkofa, mata konano, ririkofa, ta tuburaji toda ayonji koro, marito toda tu firta sawa abuhata to ayonji koro dari di kwantu tumundi kwana ayamangar. Muchita muri jindau. Dessa kijata osento jaha, ya. Wo sa te fare tubi bichiro, itu komisaris waboto. Kiji wa tebi wa na wayo no shika na fuji biado. Kia kasakabod wa karore kwang madikachi tata fare tebedo.
Bikonja 1949 tot nu toe. Toen kom je al fetti, dan maak ik agroleti.
Mitai den da petakluko. Temi ofroisi mo libi Hollandse kamp. Nin de kisime ofroisi. Daarmee over is ja. Maar gewoon zo libi familie. Ik zie niets, ik nooit.
Maar u sabi, ala lesu aba zijn probleem de mai puro libu ground of de mai put de beste pe un prani pe un fisi pe un onti de mai paseo adi e ko ina mag go onti da pe moro ina mag prani moro.
Mijn naam is Joan van der Bos. Mijn naam is Joan. Mijn zulk van Usabi, lantisap mijn eerste uma kapten voor Suriname in de Ingi dorpo. Dus maar voor jou zo elip voor prani, visie, onti. Ja, na de doeptje landbouw, na dat na de libi.
Tem noite? Nem noite o papira de. Noite o papira. Ja, nada. Na hersani dat de mai fet nu land fuja na mona ilugu. Dat na hersani ba. Una mankis papira, uma machtige papira fuja zere una mavene.
Wat sana sa eigenlijk? Adolpopje pelkadisi eigenlijk. Teluka dorpo is eigenlijk, nou in zo'n dorpo ja. Maar als ik nou maar begrijp ook toe taki, dat de man meneer Baron kon hebben, het ik apprecieer voor uno.
Ecotourism is another form of development that is displacing indigenous tribes from their traditional lands.
Rosalia de mabdim tractor de make passing go there. Poti isi port me dom me ko hotel drabe. big hotel.
O anu presida pe. Want dape amui preside. A dape de mego scude libi de fisi de mego ku de mego onti. Moi presi fo pe un desma fo contant de mante kala de preside mai teki. Ano kan soto.
Uma hectare dentro aqui.
Mi não sabe botar dor o drape. Mi sa tak na mi pagorombe de drape. Dat mi sabe. E mi cantege nem nem fesi. Ja, mi cantege. Mi no frede ftege want na mi foster ek na mi kondre. Mi no gona e kondre, en kona mi kondre.
En da uno mango dape moro. Dape ogono. Pe ogo fisi. Pe ogo onti. Pomo kapan podosi.
Over agrontori mi wan taki. Ade wan bigi sari gimi. If mi musluku. Va umbusi. Lanti ne hori kanini tins na nga uno a overhead. Tak. Mo betrek eerst den smasa dena in de buurt voor a busi dat sami sitak vrij kom go accident even. If de gebruik a busi dat. Maar zonder inspraak voor uno, gewoon de schrijft den besluit. Begin gisma beschikking na bakasi. En op sanina regering voor disi, op sanina regering voor jaren 70. Want binnen wan kies voor awan voor grondbeschikking en grondhuur. Mi wan kies voor collectief, dus in stamverband levende volken dat na uno. We kies voor collectief grondenrecht, maar mi wan kies voor tak prat pis grondbeschikking want voor voorouders no besa basan dat. Ube lip gewoon in wan presi in wan dorp. We prani, we meken oso po wani, was may psa gewoon nami. Me psa na was mami. Klop, ika opa porgim da me psa uno wana sanda djani na dorp. Dat na so bakra libi na nga trafolk na ding, kande na ding. Den gewoonte of na den gwentik bama. Den gwenti den om kompot tap uno. Want uno lip anders. Uno wil lip niet naar natuur, uno na natuurmens. Dus den om kom vorm uno fa den wani. Umus vorm uns refi fa wani. Want uno aprecht voor libi.
Eric Wayne Hardda is a member of the Arawak, or Lokono tribe. He's a grassroots organizer for indigenous rights and works with many different indigenous tribes and communities throughout Suriname.
If they're talking about development, it should benefit the group, who lives in the interior. As I said, you can't talk about development if I'm not in the process. If I'm not a part, of the process, if I'm not part of the management. I have to give you my own perspective, give you my experience, because it will affect and has impact on my life. So it's not that we are against, but we want to be a part and we want to share benefits of all those projects.
Trasma fudoro se muskong tak ja zoansan wan doen in het dorp en je moest de eens bijvoorbeeld de ven go to jara moest de eens to direct kapten bestuur moest teken unawana sandat. If de ven go to ja of aardolie wat dan ook of bauxit na unulik inheemse bestuur of inheemse leiders moest kona tafarada taki samen na nga bevolking inspraak voor bevolking. En voor de eens of niet, dan pas lanti ukan tegi lanti sa uwani, dan pas akan te kwam beslissen, maar anom teken tape eentje uno wana sandati.
In the late 1950s, Soralco, an aluminum mining company, and the local government proposed a dam for hydropower, largely to supply the aluminum industry with cheap electricity for their facilities. But some of the interior communities were wary of this development.
We go on full cadring, passa 25 que era bloco pondo. Uma paebe de ape. De bego culto for uma tatori. Isap sa attack, you know. Attack water fire. Yeah, not too brother. Mate pa ego stribi ka ba no one si fire moro. Ma ala Europe pa e abi water fano. Water before fire.
The fire versus water debate was settled on the side of fire, or electricity, from the dam that Suralco built. Suralco, now known as Alcoa, built a dam, a hydropower plant, an aluminum smelter, an alumina refinery, and other facilities. The Suriname government agreed to provide the necessary water and property rights, expanded Suralco's bauxite concessions, and gave Suralco more land for further geological research. The dam created water shortages for tribes downstream and flooding for tribes upstream. The mining industry benefited from the cheap electricity, while the interior communities suffered.
It benefits only the multinationals because I think more than 80% of all those energy is going to the multinationals like Alcoa, Suralco, and now we have IAMGold. So I think it's not benefits the local people, nor the people who were displaced at that period.
Villages were forcibly moved as the dam flooded 1,500 square kilometers of rainforest, or 1% of the country. Coffeecamp was one of the villages that was displaced by the Brokopondo Reservoir.
Okay, my name is Guillermo Walker. I'm from Coffeecamp. It's about the history of Coffeecamp, and yes, Coffeecamp was before in the lake they call Van Blommestein Stroommeer. There was before, and they moved us because of the water. I don't know what it was, but they moved us from there and put us in Coffeecamp. Now the village name is New Coffeecamp because we are removed. It was like someone shoots you, you know. They won't give you life. I mean, it's not nice because our maroon peoples have a tradition. When you live here, people of you die here. You want to stay there and live with your people until the end of time. You don't want to move and go and live somewhere else. Then it'll be like you lost your, I call it, your immune heritage. Yeah. So we want to live there with the people together and die with them together. That's it.
For New Coffeecamp and other villages, the dam was just the beginning of development that threatens their communities. Now gold has become more valuable than aluminum to the Suriname economy. The gold industry relies on hydropower generated by the Brokopondo Dam. Also, in recent years, gold has been discovered in the areas around Brokopondo and New Coffeecamp.
Yes, if they want to move us again, that will be a tough one because we are not ready to move and we won't move because we know they want to move us because of the gold. So they have to pay.
The global recession has hit developing countries hard, and Suriname is no exception. The price of minerals dropped at a time when Suriname's aluminum production was already dropping. However, in 2009, the International Monetary Fund, commonly known as IMF, reported that Suriname's economy is still relatively stable because of the increased gold exports. But gold mining is destructive and toxic to the land and water. So the economic benefits of gold mining are threatening the long-term health of the land and the people in the interior. Sarah Augustine and Dan Peplow are the co-founders of Suriname Indigenous Health Fund. Sarah is a sociologist and Dan is a mine toxicologist. They have been working with interior communities since 2002, when Dan worked as an environmental mining advisor to the U.S. Embassy in Suriname. Their work and PhD research have focused on the environmental and health effects due to mining.
Yeah, you know, mining has just a lot of impacts. I mean, from first of all, you're just going in and just ripping up a large segment of the forest, and so you have deforestation, and then the physical disturbance of the soil and rerouting waterways, and and they use the water to run the mining process. And so if you look at the mine, all the gold mining that occurs, it's all done near water because they utilize that water.
There are pictures of rivers in Suriname that show that the water system is actually gone. It's just a series of puddles, and it goes on for kilometers and kilometers and kilometers, forests just raised and then the water destroyed.
You know, just that disruption of that soil and the use of the water flushes away lots of sediments and releases, you know, just everything that's in the soil. You know, every category of organics and inorganics is probably being added to the water, plus biological contaminants, bacteria, and parasites.
This issue for me is not really one related to, you know, this beautiful resource is now destroyed, although I'm not saying that's not an issue. The point is the people who live in the interior in Suriname count on that water as their only clean supply of water. That is drinking water, bathing water, water for everything that you need to do in a day. They are reliant upon this river for that source of water. And mining on this level destroys that resource.
Dimo, lobi asia bokwe. Dimo, lobi asia bokwe. Dimo, lobi asia bokwe.
Quanto murão?
Lobi asia bokwe.
If you not drink water, that's all kaya bakata ngono. Normally be. No one sunny day libi and once one coach or the awanja go swig the broom na water dingi. No one libis man normally be zonder drinken water.
We hebben problemen met drinkwater. En het is bijzonder slecht water. Onze rivierwater is onbruikbaar. Maar we zijn genoodzaakt, als het niet regent, rivierwater te gebruiken. Ook drinken, kleren wassen, eigenlijk voor alles.
Want daar kijken dat naar een mooi kijken voelen. En wat heb ik kijken vaarlijk. Maar nou nog wat weet je against het of wat melk wat koffie. Da awata dat je aanboom. Da afuveli inomandinge. Paude ya wapiki tu diro tenke wa BIP. Tede teko. Da de ki udia wa fuka. Ule rabi wata.
No sap suma euro ko dapre of na poknakkers of na IM gold maar watra indrineti watra e doti en ai mopoko faden. Nade tu door pu tussen makakriki na commissaris Kondre. Gomit koku grong, gomit piki sarong na ondro sei. Awatra e doti du da wesi.
Go to. Yeta go to the walk na wataini. Na aliba. So jinja wata ad ode shika ube. Ebe de fisi se fite kishi de fisi nyang, de fisi ne boom. 5 minutes so de fisi poli, a wata bu mo. Ye no ma jinja aliba wata.
Siki bij voor kijken, dit is nou een kriki water, hè? Uno sap sanga sandina water, so vergif, kwek, alla soort sandina water. Dit is na faliba. De as don baka wat tu di da yoshi, als don alla soort toko forum, uno man, en a voedsel in sapon santaki. Aliba na principe we kis water. Abusi na supermarkt, na apotheek. Maar op een gegeven moment uno man me gebruik voor de sandis morgen.
So the people who are living in the impacted environment, indigenous people, Amerindians, Maroons, are consuming food that's contaminated with mercury. They are dealing with contaminated water supplies as a result of the mining industry, from increased E. coli due to people working there and polluting their water, from barges who are dredging up the sediments in the river, from cyanide releases from large-scale mining, and absolutely no action is being taken to protect the health of these people.
Ik ben juffrouw Zegenaar Monique. Ik ben ook leerkracht op Kwaku Gronschool. Ik heb een baby. En als ik papvoeder moet maken, heb ik goed drinkwater nodig. Ik heb toen aan de minister van Volksgezondheid gevraagd. Het houdt me nog steeds bezig hoor. Ze waren hier. Wij van de school waren toen gaan naar de waterkant bij ze gegaan. Ik heb hem toen gevraagd. Zeg van, we hebben schoon drinkwater nodig. We hebben het niet en ik heb een baby. Hij heeft me toen gezegd, pak het water, dit water. Het was toen viezer. Ik moet het nemen, uitkoken en pap koken voor die baby.
Boiling is a common method for making water safer to drink. Boiling does kill most bacteria and parasites. However, metals such as mercury are not removed from the water by boiling. Metals can only be removed from water with the use of specialized equipment.
Mijn antwoord was toen, drinkt u het eerst. En ik was boos en ik ben weggelopen. Want dat was voor mij geen antwoord. Het houdt me nog steeds bezig. Je kan me niet zeggen om het water op te koken en te drinken, terwijl jij het zelf niet gaat drinken.
Vaak hebben we zieke kinderen, diarree, ook volwassenen hebben er last van. Dan hebben de verpleegsters daar hun handen vol.
Want a diarree is aan dat die. A foto dat bij mij sa. Abchinda ato so de tak diarree. De nomata yusana oorzaak van diarree. Te abchin ko dede. Ishe? De mai tegi san de mawani. Maar no do ko shi asani no. Tak no. Na a watera do a probleem.
Dr. Rossell is a public health physician at the University of Washington. He started volunteering with Suriname Indigenous Health Fund in 2009.
Diarrhea, it's one of the top killers of children worldwide. And in some places, it's the number one killer of children. And with a little bit of soap and adequate amounts of clean water, and some very inexpensive rehydration solutions, it's pretty much can vanish. I don't know what would happen if we just assume that, at least, if you had a big family, at least one of your kids would die from diarrhea, and that was just a given. I mean, that just wouldn't fly in the U.S. But that's the reality in a lot of places.
And how many chinere asan lati kid fador pujagba? A diarrhea sani.
A lot of children already died from this village.
De onsa tan baka kofere de takino. Diarrhea, altijd diarrhea kirapching. Das ma aufrede ftanja.
Abata ya mutiengo ya foto go lay de tama da medicine ta ki so emiti unu ya nya we dingia nikaba ga tani fe.
Suriname is flooded with a lot of people who are seeking gold during this gold rush.
Basically, you have two levels of mining. One is the large-scale mining done by incorporated companies, many of them multinationals. They tend to be more mechanized, have more advanced technology, better efficiencies, and it will often use a cyanide process.
The cyanide process for gold mining is illegal in some countries because of its toxicity. However, it is used by large corporations in Suriname. In this process, the first step is to treat a slurry of water and soil with sodium cyanide. The cyanide and gold in the soil join to form a large charged molecule, the gold cyanide ion. Then the gold cyanide ion is processed to collect the gold and release the cyanide in wastewater. While cyanide does break down, it breaks into cyanates and thiocyanates, less toxic but still dangerous chemicals. These chemicals can remain in water and soil for years, causing death and health problems for humans and animals.
Women mentioned to us that prey that they often hunt, or bush pigs, were coming up dead. They specified by Mindaneti Creek where they would go for water.
Luko kiriki na abrasi na mindrineti luko pa watra mo po na mindrineti e pur a herdot watra troe po na matawai liba.
We knew that there was a Cambior mining operation nearby, or IM Gold operation, that they were using a cyanide process, and so we thought, well, it could be cyanide. If cyanide is released into Mindaneti Creek, then that would certainly cause the death of, wildlife in the surrounding area. Through extensive conversation, the community said to us, we really want to investigate what's going on because this is impacting our food supply. And so we brought with us cyanide test kits back to the community of Quackagrown. We trained them how to use a sanitary process so that they wouldn't corrupt the sample, and then to chart the results over time. And so they did that. They began to collect water samples daily and test for cyanide release.
In 2002, the mining company Cambior prepared an environmental impact assessment, an EIA, for the Rosabelle Mine project. The EIA mentions the impacts to the Mindraneti River multiple times and states that cyanide overflow will not happen. On page 137, Cambior states that water will be extracted from the Mindraneti River. On page 138, Cambior once again addresses this as a moderately significant concern, temporary loss of aquatic habitat in the Mindraneti River because of water withdrawal during the mine operation. On page 139, Cambior promises that no cyanide or other chemicals will be detectable in the discharges or effluents.
As a result of that project, without ever having compiled data, without ever collecting substantial data, the mine executives came to the village and began to want to negotiate with them about cleaning up the cyanide retention pond that they had there. And over time, they admitted outright that they were dumping cyanide or releasing cyanide during the rainy season when they felt there was overflow right into Mindraneti Creek, and started to negotiate with the tribe how to mitigate those environmental impacts.
Then there's the smaller scale artisanal gold mining operations, which are small groups of individuals with, that have, operate on very low budgets, operate with, whatever cash they generate as they produce gold.
Most of the small-scale mining uses a mercury process to separate the gold from the soil.
There's an estimated 10,000 miners from Brazil who are here working.
Yes, this is the first day in the camp of the work. So these are the machines that we're working with, This is how the excavator tried to push down this tree. This is one of the big work that the excavator have to do during the work. Push trees.
What they do is they use high-pressured hoses and liquefy the soil.
It's run through a sluice box, and gold is heavier, so it's trapped in the mesh in the sluice box, and at the end of a period of 1 to 3 to 5 days or something, the sluice box is stopped and the mats are shaken out, And the gold has settled out and gotten trapped in that mat, and the rest of the lighter sediments have been washed away, except for what they call black sand. It is about the same weight as the gold, and so those two are mixed. And to clean that up and to separate the gold out, the miners add mercury, and it selectively binds the gold. And then they wash away the black sand, and they take that gold mercury amalgam, squeeze out as much of the mercury as they can, burn off the rest, and you're left with gold that still has some mercury left in it, but that's what they take to the gold shops and then sell. The gold shops then penalize them for the contaminants, and then they further burn off more of the mercury and purify it and then work it into whatever final form that they sell and export.
Jacques Reeder, business owner of Tomahawk Outdoor Supply, is based in the city of Paramaribo. He's a sports fisherman and leads fishing tours along the coast and into the interior.
The only situation of the health of the fish that I'm aware of is the mercury situation. And especially where the so-called garipeiros, which are the small Brazilian gold diggers, gold miners, are working with everywhere they have their gold concessions, they work with the mercury. There are different types of fish. You have the freshwater fish and you have the fish that come from the sea. So there's nothing wrong with the fish from the sea. There's the fish that comes from the interior, which you do not know where it comes from. That can be a big problem for you.
Mercury is toxic and absorbed through breathing contaminated air, skin contact, and eating contaminated food such as fish. Mercury toxicity, or Minamata disease, is a documented environmental illness that leads to a multitude of health problems, including neurological damage, birth defects, and even death.
That is a big problem, not specific for the fishermen because they can catch and release, but for the local people who live from the fish in those areas, that can affect them very badly, yes. Especially pregnant women. That will affect the local people, not the fishermen, and that's all because of the gold miners.
We know, the authorities in this country know, the authorities in the United States know that 30 to 60 tons of mercury is deposited in the interior of Suriname every single year. 30 to 60 tons in a country the size of Washington State.
Mercury is a mobile pollutant. It travels across land and water. Villages that are upstream and far away from mining sites are being contaminated. The mercury moves through the food chain as fish and other small prey absorb it into their fat layers. Larger animals and humans eat the contaminated fish and absorb the mercury. This is called biomagnification. Over time, mercury levels in humans become dangerously high.
Last year we had some guy which was here with some mercury instruments to measure the mercury in those species, and it was 10 times the allowed amount of mercury that was in those fish.
Jacques gave the fish samples to Dan Peplow so that he could test the fish for mercury. The fish tissue was run through the analyzer, and the results showed that there was 10 times the normal level of mercury in the fish.
You don't know how much worse it's going to get. So if people are going on in the interior to eat the fish, you have a big problem, because you will have people with a lot of not healthy people, and it's going to be the government's care to solve this problem. So that means it's a lot of money. It has to go to a hospital here or for something else that they're going to have another expenses which are going to make it heavier for we taxpayers too, to solve this problem. And The most important thing is that you're killing people. You know?
In early 2008, a community-directed study was done by the Wayana Indigenous Village of Apatina, Suriname.
First, I talked to the local leaders, and they told me that they were interested, you know.
Pemide go to manote ete. Tok mi abi kwek mi edesi alaski.
I got in touch with the Suriname Indigenous Health Foundation, and they said they could support me because they have the knowledge. The first thing we've done is we get a training to collect heart samples, and after the training we got the material, we got the equipment. So it was only local people who took the heart samples, and we sent it to the Suriname Indigenous Health Foundation, and they do, you know, the lab test.
159 participants in the Apatina community collected hair samples for mercury analysis. Although no mercury level is safe, the United States Environmental Protection Agency recommends that mercury levels stay below 1 part per million in hair samples. None of the 159 participants fell into this low-risk safe range. 40 community members had levels between 1 part per million and 11 parts per million. They have elevated risk for mercury-related health problems. 119 community members had mercury levels above 11 parts per million and are at high risk for health problems, including serious neurological damage.
The results show us that there were a lot of poisoning, there were a lot of contamination in the body of the indigenous people. So we needed more knowledge, we needed more people with, you know, who has the knowledge about mercury in the body. So after we got the results, we went back to Apatina and Apaike with Dan Peplo and with David Russell.
We flew into the capital, spent a few days there getting supplies together and having some meetings with some community leaders, and then got in a very small plane and flew into the center of the country.
And they explained to the people mercury, what is mercury, and the impacts of mercury on the human body.
A number of women that had concerns about, I believe they'd been tested previously for mercury levels, and a few of them came up and said, you know, we heard we have high levels and we want to see if you can find any problems with it. So there was several women that I did some basic neurologic testing on them. And they did have some abnormalities that, you know, they were complaining of some numbness in off in their hands and feet, and on examining a couple of them, they actually had some problems with what we would consider cerebellar function, so coordination of movement.
Mention the problem. It's easy, but to find a good solution for the problem, that's the challenge that we have.
You know, they've been told time and time again, stop eating contaminated fish, and that's kind of like, you know, telling people to stop breathing the air, you know, because the air is polluted. It's not a helpful thing to tell them, and I think they realize that, you know, more than a lot of, you know, than you know, some of the public health experts who are saying, well, you know, it's fine in the U.S. to say, well, if you're pregnant, avoid eating fish and this and that, because there's other options. But if you're a community that's based where your main source of protein and calories is from what you get from the river, it's not helpful to say, well, you should really stop eating that.
It is a tradition of indigenous people that they are not interested in gold nor any natural resources. They respect Mother Earth as it is, and digging holes, looking for gold, you know, cutting trees, like, you know, doing business. They are not used to it. It's not in the tradition, not in the culture. They are not in the gold business. and still they got affected by all those mercury. And that's why we want to bring the story of mercury contamination in the territory of the Wayana to the outside world, to let people know that there is a problem and that the government and third parties, they are not using the mercury in a sustainable way or mining gold in a sustainable way, and that there has to be a stop or the Wayana people will disappear.
Que uno bigio agwe o ma o aseto asa ide kio do con later a generatie do con later. Mek de con geniet kieso ha pris. Wa uno o grande guedala con no demor.
Mina dor sabayo en mina fu abrador fu invernador. Mamisari masansa mesari tipi imi ati mile kwang ingi frodi bamui commit vanaf die voorouders. San salebe miti in de stree van de befetti fosi lek foste. Agers precies zo as stree die si de na de jongen ete we vieren ete. Non de ne kiru no geestelijk na gong maar geestelijk na leri de kiru no.
Ja, me dus uno ja foude ja ube panya en we are kom bakata kion wel. Uan ontwikkel la presi kom chin somoro suti. Takiongo de chiwan sai ka baka de no ma abenso hebilek fau aben de no ma abenso perlek fau aben takiongo wel bepaalde sanelek fa.
There should be social studies, you know, what's the effects and the impacts of those projects. Also, what will they gain out of those projects? If they're gonna get benefits, and what is the benefits? Because not only promises, but they have to be sure that it will give them work, you know, it will give them school, it will give them good health care. So we want to be a part of all those activities that the government and other third parties are planning to do and to have in our territory, in our communities, that will affect and that will have impact on our lives.
Uno wan fit na gong na de sandati mananga mofo taki nang wan pen nang wan papira da bilintak dat na muro rechtvaardig fiti sa denagron tapununo.
Wat je ga kranti we ga media mat solis next ne order de mane arkuno. Dus no wat ik wat trafasi o gota pa international vlak fu. Char o probleem ga door op te meka moro bi gemeenschap fu dorosi. Si sana o probleem en vader makan awan invloed fu oplossing komen.
En alasma die ekona unu we ontvang den de waka je punu en ubrida de ma de brada nga sadis kona unu en ko je punu fulek den bepaalde san uit vanuit sang we ervaar aladi.
Yamtenge kwawa kulima se achale. Makomeki modo.
Yo tak filmen met jakba, dus in filmen met mooi jakba. Dus mijn taki. En met de kassanse ook moro fara. Voor de mana buitenland si sa ep saya.
En ik ga morgen nog agi, maar ik ga om een belangstelling. Dus in een shaman, dus in een veel next. Dus ama kom bakken wan jari, ama no kan next, toch met brasama. Je begrijpt toch? Want ik ga door een inzet, een middenleven, sa ama ebete. Dat is belangrijk.
Mami saptak ay feti dis anuan feti food tide mi gona lanti da tamara mi kis antwoord ba. Mi saptak na wan langa pasi na wan procedure na wan langa sani maar mi wantak umuskis antwoord tapasan disi. Want urulek ingi apuan zekerheid nunu libi sa PUD na nga pewego.
Ebe, da quero da moni. Ebe, bo, da quero da moni. Caimaron da moni, ebe, bo. Que a doma do da doce faboya, da chiqua banaro doce faboya, bara olabaro doce faboya. Yeah, okay, that's what.
Yeah, well. Thank you.
En alla den smasa do pot den krakti, den firi na den lobby gi unu, gi abun roko sa do dugi unu. Bigi grantangi metere namens a bestuur na a bevolking voor pikin poika. Dat mi bewanta.